Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Modern Market, where every day we discuss everything to do with the modern market, that is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to make some, or in an ideal case, a lot of money on the internet. Loaded up for discussion today, we have AI meme coin GOAT, just checking the charts, surging over an 800 million market cap. It did hit 850 million just before. Vitalik calling Saylor's comments around BTC self-custody, quote-unquote, batshit insane. Very curious to dive into that. Sammy has prepared that bit of news for us. And Pudgy Penguins coming out with the news that they're live in 2,000 Walgreens stores. We've also got the latest on price action on crypto and NFTs and a discussion on how to find new opportunities in DeFi as part of the legendary DeFi segment. Quite excited for that one. Today, I have Sammy with me in the co-host seat, and we are ready to get this show started. But before we do that, just a reminder, friends, that nothing that we say here is financial advice. This market is very risky. We do not know anything for sure. So please exercise your own judgment and proceed with caution. With that out of the way, Sammy, welcome to the show. How are you doing? How are you feeling today?
I'm good. It's almost the end of the week, but there's so much going on. So yeah, keen to get into the discussions of the day.
Yeah, I love it. We got quite a few things to discuss today, and I'm still taking my time to get used, looking around all the ways for those people watching us on stream to my new screen setup. I got myself into a bit of a war with Kalano in upgrading the number of screens. Did I reach the stage where it's completely ridiculous already?
Well, I think you've hit quite a few impressions, and I'm keen to get some analysis from you as to like how much you think you've made from those Twitter subscription payments. Well, not subscription payments, the Elon payout to proportion to cover the cost of your MacBook, because it's a hefty price to pay. Was it $5,000?
It was with Apple Care 6.2, but yeah. I got it basically. I bought it like secondhand as a 3 weeks old device, and I bought it for, was it 3.8K? That's exactly the idea. Like, I'm tracking the impressions that I got. Basically every picture or every post that either references the MacBook or has a picture of it is tracked in a little Excel sheet, up to 280K impressions from farming the MacBook in various settings. I'll obviously do the math on that and kind of have like a little progress bar to see how much Elon has paid of my new MacBook purchase. And I'm only going to stop until it's fully funded by Elon. That's kind of the general idea behind it.
You kind of want to bait him as well. If you can bait him to engage with you, then you get a huge payout that would more than cover it.
Yeah, the thing is, if I go for the straight up bait, you're not allowed to kind of like engagement farm explicitly. And if you get a lot of traction, someone will community note you for that and you will lose the revenue. So I can't post something like, I will farm engagement off this MacBook until I hit 5 million views, so Elon pays for it, because even if that worked, someone will community note that and take the revenue away.
Fair enough. I don't really know how the community notes really work. So there was one recently, I can't remember what it was, but it struck me as being, the OpenSea one with Whale, where they said zoom out, and Whale did a post that kind of illustrated the volume when you actually zoom out, and then it got community noted. I don't know if you saw that one.
No, I didn't see that one, but I can tell you how community notes work, as I'm a part of that program. So basically, you have a completely separate username if you're community noting, so that people don't know, oh, this is Legendary or this is Sammy writing a community note. That's completely detached from that, and it has a reputational system. You can kind of choose the things you want to community note. Like, despite my X is in English, my phone's in English, everything I do is in English, I still get like suggestions for basically German or Austrian hashtags, because location-wise, I'm still, well, in Austria for the moment. And hence, I also get like suggested to community note like posts around Austrian politics, for example. And then there's like a Reddit-like system in there where you can vote a community note as helpful or basically not helpful or against the policy. The way that it works is you just cannot do like a single up or down vote. Like, you have to provide reasoning as to why you vote that a community note is helpful or unhelpful. And everyone who is part of the program can community note any post. And it will show up, but not everything will be flagged as helpful. So this is why, I don't know, there was this post by, was it Brian or Ed Krasenstein? The like well-known journalists on X were commenting on something Trump related. and they're not the biggest Trump fans. So every time they post something, and even if they have a typo in there, people will just go and community note them to say, hey, there's a typo in your post. And it will show as a community note until enough people flag it that as basically abusing the system and not being helpful at all.
So can you get your rights revoked if you abuse the system? So you have to be a good community member.
Yeah, you have to be a good community member. You have to be in good standing with the community notes to be displayed like faster on top on that. And I don't know if you can get banned for that if you like keep abusing it, but there is like a multi-tier system in how your notes are weighed and rated.
Sounds good. Ready to get into the news?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's start. Let me bring it up on screen. Let's start with the price action. We have Bitcoin up 0.7% at almost 67K. ETH, however, is down 2.3% at 2.5K price point. Solana is having a green day. Solana is actually up 4% over the last 24 hours, continuing a very, very positive upwards trend with an increase of 14% over the last 7 days and currently at $173. In terms of the main headlines, as we mentioned at the top of the show, we have the AI meme coin goat surging another 50%. In the snapshot, we said it's 800 mil. In the meantime, it did surpass 850 mil actually. Then we have the second piece of news where Vitalik was referencing an interview that Saylor was giving and basically explaining his position around why he thinks that self-custody is not necessarily the greatest thing in BTC, and made a couple more specific remarks on that Vitalik went to call in a post as batshit crazy or batshit insane. It's the third piece of news. Pudgy Penguins continuing their IP proliferation, launching in 2,000 Walgreens nationwide. Heading over to the NFT section, NFTs are having a pretty red day, actually. Bored Apes are down 4.8% over the last 24 hours, sitting at the 11.7 floor. However, over the last 7 days, it's still a positive momentum. They're still up 8% as a result of the Ape Chain launch. Pudgies are down. They're down another 1.7% at a 9.13 ETH floor. They've been trending downwards over the last couple of days, basically unchanged over the last week, but it seems like they could lose that 9 ETH floor. Azukis are down 1% only, 5.12 ETH floor for them. Miladies are having another green day, up 3% at a 4.7 ETH floor. Just checking in with two other meme-related collections to see what's happening on there. On one hand, we have Sproto Gremlins down 14% over the last 24 hours, down 26% over the last 7 days, and sitting at a 2.35 ETH floor. However, Project Ian kind of taking the opposite side, up 10% over the last 24 hours, back at a 1.5 ETH floor. So I feel like on the meme NFT side, it's a bit of a mixed bag, but definitely Miladies and also the Remilio family have been having a good week so far. Just wanted to check in with you, Sammy, if you have any observations from the NFT market before we head into the Web3 roundup.
Yeah, I don't think there was any significant movements on the core NFTs, like the key players, but there was a couple of mints that I want to draw attention to. And one's been around for a while, and that's Investigations by Zach XBT. So I think it was yesterday that really popped off for some reason. I think it was like an investigation that he did. Some people digged up an old post where he was like, hey, I'm minting one of the investigations that I've done recently. And that exploded, and that's kind of had a bit of a sell-off, probably down by about 33%, but that's on base. And similarly, another one that went pretty crazy yesterday, it ended up having 91K editions, open editions minted, with over 7,000 collectors. And that was a white paper by Schloms, and that's on base as well. And it's just something that I'm keeping an eye on because it's quite an unusual one. It's literally just a blank white paper. So it's almost like a white canvas, and I'm just interested to see which direction he takes it. It's giving me a bit of like visualized value, Jack Butcher kind of vibes. But it could be a nothing burger. It's just something that I found quite interesting. There's quite a few people that have kind of got involved. It was a relatively cheap mint, and yeah, it's just something that I'm monitoring. I think it was the most minted open edition on the new Uniswap the Uniswap version that they've integrated into Zora, which I found quite an interesting metric that he kind of highlighted. So one to watch, I think. And that's just I guess just a testament to like what's happening in Base. You might not have these high value NFTs, but open editions seem to be what seems to proliferate that side of things for NFTs on Base, and Base are obviously crushing it with. Recently, I think they had 2 billion TVL past that mark. I think Aerodrome, which is the main DEX, that blew past. I think it went over about 1.5 billion in TVL on that DEX alone, which is pretty crazy. And then you've got, I think they flipped Arbitrum this week as well in terms of TVL, which was something that I thought was quite interesting. So there's stuff happening on Base, and I think the connection with Coinbase and people seeing it as a reliable custodian from the institutional side and kind of payments, Web3 payments infrastructure and partnerships with Circle is just interesting as well. So it's just something to keep an eye on. And I guess it's quite relevant for the custodial side of things that we'll touch on later with Vitalik and Michael Saylor.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that fantastic shout out. I think it's also very impressive from, the perspective that we have all those competing L2s. We have more and more L2s launching. And I've been saying this for a while, that I think the biggest challenge an L2 has to solve for is user retention, apart from the technical sets, which I'm more than happy to leave them to Brett whenever we have him on the show. But from a user perspective, it's the user retention standpoint. And Base is doing really, really well on that. So definitely thankful for you shouting this out. However, we do have a few things to cover this show, so let's move into the Web3 Roundup to bring you the rest of the news from around the space. As the first piece of news, we have the creator of Ordinals, Casey, announcing a new Rune Memento Mori. I've been seeing this being shared around quite a few groups, and I think the expectation there's going to be a good old gas war on this one. But I do think the mint is still a couple of days, 9 days ago, from the time that we posted that, Casey posted this mint announcement, so it should be sometime next week. Next piece of news, Denmark reportedly prepared to tax unrealized crypto gains at 42%. That could go live as early as January 2026. We've been seeing some more of those taxation, crypto-specific taxation news also coming out of Italy. I think also capital gains going up in Italy for crypto from 20-ish to 40+%. Don't remember the exact numbers on that. Nigerian government dropping all charges against Binance executive Tigran Gambaryan is the third piece of news. In terms of some other news, we have Abstract announcing a build and residence program. A couple more details from Abstract Chain on that, saying that we started this program after realizing that builders in the space often lack sufficient support. In the Abstract Build-in Residence program, we take care of the hard parts of building an app so you can focus on the fun stuff. And then we have ACK edition of 30 selling out with edition number 1. Actually, I'm sharing this on screen, selling for almost 27 ETH, and the 30 editions raising a total of 102 ETH. Additional comment on that is that all those editions are not only digital, but paired with a phygital as well. Sammy, going back to you, is there anything from the roundup that's catching your attention that you want to dive a bit deeper into?
I think the tax stuff's interesting to me. I mean, so I'm a chartered accountant, so I come from I think I chartered back in like 2016. So the whole tax stuff is interesting, partly because we touched on the whole inflating our way out of this debt crisis in the US at the moment, and I think a lot of jurisdictions seem to be pushing this unrealized gain taxation kind of bill or amendments that they're doing in each jurisdiction. And as we touched on yesterday, I think that if you inflate your way out and these crypto assets and other sort of assets gain in value significantly, and you don't sell them and they're subject to these like tax regimes, then that's quite an interesting way that governments can kind of get that additional revenue to then repay down those debts. So that to me is just quite an interesting thing that you're kind of seeing across different jurisdictions, not only the US, but other jurisdictions seem to be following suit. And I do wonder whether it's kind of that preparation for that potential inflation strategy that, because obviously raising interest rates when you've got a $35 trillion deficit would be quite painful for the US government. So this inflate your way out that Paul Tudor Jones alluded to this week seems to be an approach that a lot of people think could be a viable route that they end up taking.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. We did get into the US debt situation a bit on yesterday's show, but I think it's also like, if you want to take anything positive from that, it's kind of an acknowledgement that governments are taking crypto that seriously, that they now are seeing it as a potential income stream. On the other hand, it kind of reminds me of, what Norway did when they added basically a ultra high net worth tax that made people move away, move abroad, and did cost them a couple $100 million instead of having an additional, I don't know, 10, 20, 30, 40 million, whatever they wanted to gain from that. So they did incur a net loss of a couple $100 million by actually having that new tax. On the other hand, what we're seeing more and more in the European Union is basically exit tax. So if you move away to another country, you will also get taxed on unrealized gains. I think that's a thing for you as well in the UK, right?
Yeah, I think if you leave the country and you've made a gain, then you get taxed as if it's realized.
Yeah,
I think there is certain rules around it that if you come back into the country within a certain time frame as well, then you get pinged and all this kind of stuff, even if you live after it. But we're going through a similar thing at the moment where upper tax payers could end up paying a higher tax. I think the capital gains might be going up to 45. So I think you would have seen OV, so OSF, post about that on the timeline, how the UK tax system is not it's not going to be favouring those that have those the additional funding or the additional wealth. Like, it's not going to be to the rich effectively. And then to your point, I think we could end up seeing a lot of people move over to the likes of Dubai, which a lot of the people I'm talking to in London, they seem to be doing that. But then again, if you've lived overseas, you're that far away from your family, then it does become a little bit hard. So it becomes a bit of a trade-off. It's almost like a cost of living in the UK.
Yeah. No, that's a very good point. I think we also had France a couple of days ago on the show saying that they are basically adapting to the US system, that wherever you live, you are a tax citizen of France, and you're going to pay taxes for that, being the third country in the world to do that. There's definitely a lot of change happening with that. I see Funky on the stage, not only having his hand up, but emoting aggressively with thumbs down. Funky, my friend, welcome to the stage. Curious to get your thoughts on that as well.
Gem friend. I just, kind of Sammy and I were talking about it on the timeline earlier this morning. And I feel that what's really being missed here is the double whammy that this will cause. Not only are you broadcasting that you're going to tax these people and you're going to have that, what is also in effect brain drain, right? Because you have some of the smartest, younger, savvier people who are in this space are going to want to flee the country because there's the potential for them to be taxed at such a ridiculous rate. But more importantly, I think people sometimes don't think about sort of the microeconomics of these situations and how you destroy any sort of potential, you know, sort of virtuous cycle of economic beneficence within a local economy. Because if you kept those tax rates at, normal, if you will, the people are going to choose to live there. They're going to spend their money in those local businesses. They're going to be part of that local community. People don't think about the reverberating effects of some of these larger tax policies because they think, oh, it's just revenue stream for the government. You're going to hurt the rest of the citizens who maybe aren't even involved when they do this. So I think it's an incredibly short-sighted standpoint. And I feel like there should be some Gen Z people in these offices be like, no, that's a terrible idea. And here's why. And then laying out the case for, what I'm saying, or other people would recognize that this is going to have a really negative impact on local economies that reverberates throughout the country. And then broadly speaking, across all of the EU.
Yeah, that's such a fantastic point. I feel like it's a very reactionary thing to do, to kind of see, oh, there's a new thing we can raise taxes on. We need the money. Let's just do that, and not really think about the mid to long term effects of that. Especially as many politicians, many countries love to think in election cycles and don't really think about what happens next generation, but more like how they will potentially be reelected. So I definitely think that this plays into this as well. However, let's keep the show moving, let's get into our segment of today, into my segment, Legendary DeFi. And this is our weekly segment where I break down some of the most interesting opportunities in the world of decentralized finance. And today, I want to actually take a look at a tool that I use daily to save money and find new opportunities to farm. The tool that I'm referencing is DeFi Llama. Well, you can use it to analyze L2s, look at token unlocks, track narratives, and many, many more things. I want to focus on 3 use cases that I find the most helpful. Use case number 1, Llama Swap. Llama Swap is aggregating DEX aggregators. So it's kind of a meta aggregator that works across more than 15 EVM compatible chains. And the way it works is that you select a chain and the token pair that you want to swap. For example, say you want to convert your ETH to USDC, and Llama Swap is providing you with up to 6 routes on how you can swap the tokens and is sorting them by the highest net output after gas fees. So it's showing you the best route for the swap that you want to do. And the difference of that can be quite significant between the best and the worst route. It's often 1 to 2%. I looked at an example this morning, how it would look like if I wanted to swap 2 ETH into meme, the token in the meme land ecosystem. And the difference between the best route that Llama Swap had suggested being Cow Swap and the other ones, whether there was Kyber Swap or 1inch, was actually in the 1.3 to 1.5% range, which means an additional 5,000 meme if you go with the best round, which means a swap that's just better in this case by roughly $80. And it adds up over time. If you keep swapping across different chains, across different token pairs, you definitely want to go for the best route. The second use case, the one that I like most, is yields. The yields feature is tracking 12,000 pools over more than 400 protocols across 94 chains. Comes with a very cool search that allows you to basically either select a token, select a kind of pool that you want to look. Do you want to do something single-sided, a staking pool? Do you want to provide liquidity? You can filter for all of that and then sort that by APY or sort that by the total value locked in the protocol. And the cool thing is that there's like also a little flag for protocols that don't have a token yet. That could be a potential airdrop play. And you can also change the search in a way that you only look for basically airdrop opportunities. This is exactly how I went about the Legendary DeFi segment last week when I talked about SparkFi, used Llama and used DeFi Llama and the yields feature to basically find that protocol. It's also what I used to find Ape Chain with the pool on Arbitrum for Ape and ETH that was yielding 5 to 6K% for a couple of days, which was a pretty fun thing to do. Moving on to number 3, bridges. L2s, obviously saying this on the show all the time, are gaining more and more mind share now that even protocols like Uniswap are launching their own L2 bridging, and finding the most efficient, the cheapest bridge is becoming more important. So DeFi Llama has a bridges feature supporting, again, a bit more than 50 chains and 50 bridging protocols. You can either use it to look at what bridge is supported by a specific blockchain. So you can go there, pick an L2, pick something more exotic like Metis, and then see that it is supported by 10 chains that you can then sort by volume to see where the most money is being bridged, where the assumption then would be that if there's more liquidity on a bridge, is a more efficient one with less slippage, meaning that it would be the cheapest bridge to use for you in that specific use case. So to sum it all up, you can do way more things on DeFi Llama, but the 3 things I wanted to focus on today was to use the tool to help you save money swapping tokens, to discover new yield farming opportunities, potential airdrop plays, and to find the most efficient bridging routes. Going straight to you, Sammy, curious to hear from your side as someone who does a very considerable amount of research in the space. What are some of the favorite tools that you're using? Are you using any of the many other features that DeFi Llama has? Like, walk me a bit through your research process on that.
Yeah, I think just to agree with you on those things that you use DeFi Llama for, I think the bridging one is particularly useful. And I remember during the airdrop days earlier this year, where airdrop farming was pretty big, a guy called Insightful pulled together a gas analysis for bridging from 2 different chains, and that took him hours, I think, to do that. So he tested each individual one. So having something that tells that for you would be super interesting. But I think from a research perspective, like if you go on DeFi Llama, there's so many different modules that you can plug into. Two of which that I think I use relatively frequently. One is the sort of the funding. So you can see all the recent raises since, I think it goes back to like 2014. So you have all these raises from different companies, how much they raised at, how much they raised, and all the different partners. So I think that's super useful, as like a lag or leading indicator as to how much capital the protocol's received, and therefore maybe how long, and also the time frame. So how long it might take on average for them to bring their product to market. So you can kind of get an idea of like what protocols have just been funded, and then you can kind of start setting up a time frame to start paying attention, notifications on for these protocols on X, to then kind of getting there early if there's some sort of opportunity. So that to me is super interesting. If you just scroll up a little bit on the camera, you can see that there's a chart which you see the monthly funding. I think it's there at the moment, but yeah, if you just click that button, so yeah, you can see how much funding. So obviously back in 2021, start of 2022, VC funding went absolutely wild, and it kind of aligns with like when I guess people are willing to open up the purse strings and sort of deploy capital, and it aligns with like when the tops were for like the Bitcoin price and crypto prices. So it can be used as an indicator. Okay, well, things might be starting to get a little bit frothy. Maybe I'll take some risk off. So I think for me, that is a really useful tool just to analyze funding. And then the second one, I guess, just from a runway perspective. So looking at each of these projects and protocols, you can look at their treasuries. So the treasuries, you can see how much funding they have in their known on-chain wallets. So you can then analyze that to see, okay, well, how much funding have they got? Have they got any campaigns coming up? Like, will the token pump because they intend to deploy capital to push sort of a narrative? Or and I think you can then sort of analyze by, you can filter by them and just see which ones are well capitalized and have that money in the bank to kind of deploy or sustain the runway for a long period of time. So I think those two tools are super interesting to me, just to look at the health and potential performance of each of these protocols, assuming the execution is done well as well.
Yeah, those are two very, very good points. I'm currently sharing the treasury one that you mentioned on screen, sorted by the total treasury. You'll see that Uniswap is on top of that list with a $3.2 billion treasury, excluding owned tokens, still at, what is it? Doesn't show the unit, probably 1.8 billion, followed by Mental Treasury, 2 billion the treasury, 400 mil, excluding on tokens. I also find that relationship between basically treasury in other currencies and treasury in the native token of protocol pretty interesting. It's actually something that we used on the modern market when we did a bit of research on different DAOs and different protocols to see what kind of treasuries they have, to get a feeling who could be an interesting partner for us. So definitely a interesting tool to use.
I think that point around the tokens that they've got in the treasury as well is super interesting, because if you sense that you might be going into a bear market and they're heavily that's heavily weighted to maybe even their own token or like tokens that are highly volatile, then that could be a little bit concerning. Like examples in the past include like FTX with the FTT token, and some other scares more recently with some other protocols. But yeah, super interesting and a great point to go to for some reliable analytics.
Absolutely, yeah. Glad we had this discussion and hope it was a helpful one, because it's definitely, I don't know, like I swap so many things a day. I bridge multiple times a day. Definitely good to be able to save money on that. However, let's keep the show moving. Let's move into the first major headline of the day. As we said at the top of the show, we have GOAT not stopping the movement upwards. Sharing this on screen, a text screener is currently at pretty much exactly 800 mil. Just before we started the show, did move up to 850-ish million dollars. A couple more interesting statistics on that, because we spent the last couple of days speaking a fair amount about Truth Terminal, about the AI meme Meta. Just wanted to bring this to the attention as well. Both of the stats coming out from Kaito AI. The first one being that GOAT is now at a total of 20% of the entire meme market mindshare. And it's also looking at the top 10 accounts that are contributing to that. And it's not a surprise that Truth Terminal, kind of the official account, is leading that mindshare, basically that mindshare top 10. And another one that came out this morning that I found pretty interesting is comparing the mindshare that Terminal of Truth has versus Murad. And actually, the Terminal, the AI, has surpassed the human, getting now more mindshare and more attention than what I would consider to be basically the number one meme coin carol, the number one person when it comes to attention in this space right now. It's pretty fascinating to see that now an AI is in the first spot and not a human anymore. What are your thoughts on that? Is this a sustainable thing? Are we like all FOMOing into GOAT and the AI meta and basically pumping and buying up everything that the Terminal of Truth is tweeting, or is there more substance to it?
So actually, when I researched this back on, I think it's about 10 days ago now, and it was actually B-Check brought it to my attention as a cool sheet point of view for me to look into. And as soon as I started researching it, I bought some. So I actually swapped some of my SPX 6900, so Murad's leading meme coin for GOAT back then. I've since sold about 50%. But the thing that got me interested was you have this Bitcoin wallet, you have this Solana wallet, but I don't think that the Truth Terminal can actually control it. And something that Brian Armstrong posted recently was trying to work out a way of setting up I'm assuming it might be a Coinbase wallet to directly link to enable that AI to actually trade. And that to me is super interesting, and seeing how or what they can experiment with the overlap between AI and crypto. Because at the moment it's a little bit disjointed. Like you've got this third-party token GOAT that was launched independently, and then the GOATCS Maximus meme was then shielded by Truth Terminal, and obviously the grant funding and stuff that was put in by Mark Andreessen. But like, yeah, I think for me it's more an experiment. Like I'm interested to see where it goes. Like the price action will follow if it continues to deliver in terms of like innovation or just keeping that mind share that Kaito, that you drew to our attention around Kaito, that platform. Then I think as long as that's there, like the price will follow. So I think I don't necessarily have any concerns there, and I'll probably hold a moon bag. But for me, someone who's like interested in researching like what are the new kind of innovations in the space, that interests me far more. And that's something I'll probably end up keeping a close eye on.
Yeah, I very much agree with that sentiment. And I also see Funky with his hand up. Going to go to you in a second. I also like that, like conceptually the intellectual side of that, to see what the AI will do, how the interaction with the human element will be, and how that basically can evolve. I'm sharing it on screen right now. Jen posted an update on the official GOAT wallet, if you want to call it like that. It's currently $12.6 million on there. So definitely interesting to see what happens if the Terminal of Truth gets a way to basically interact with that wallet balance. And I'm also curious to see if this difference, kind of the sustained virality of a meme coin that is able, or of a meme that is able to create content for itself, is something that can play out in the long term. But I would say that also one of the most fascinating things to me is that it is getting institutional interest, from obviously the sense that Mark Andreessen is talking about it quite a lot, but also the thing that we covered yesterday, or was it 2 days ago, with Wintermute vampire attacking another AI coin, vampire attacking Shogoth, and Wintermute again being that algorithmic trading firm that is posting a total trading volume of more than 5,000 billion US dollars. Just the fact that they have interest in doing basically 50 million volume in a meme coin to see what happens of that is speaking volumes. But Funky, also very curious to hear your perspective on that.
Thanks, Legendary. I'm just really fascinated by this culturally more than the price action and anything else. Like I am probably, yes, I mean I have GOAT, of course, right? Like I aped in, but I really love, I even have the notifications turned on for Terminal of Truth. Like I love reading the crazy things that it comes up with. And I can't help, and I saw that Red Phone Crypto, shout out to him, because he basically went big into GOAT. and I know I've mentioned it on the show before, and I've recommended, and anybody who has not read, and it was about a year ago, he writes these essays at the end of the year, 69 Dreams and Delusions. And he talked about in that, it was very prescient. The prognostication was top notch. He said, we are going to see the intersection of crypto and AI in ways that we cannot anticipate, like this, right? I think that this is really just the beginning. I think none of us have any clue what life is going to be like in 5 years, just because of these advents and these things that are converging. It's so interesting. I mean, what a time to be alive, as the quote says. And I find all of this incredibly fascinating as a nerd. And that's what I really want to say. But yeah, really cool stuff. Read that essay if you've never read it. 69 Dreams and Delusions, Red Phone Crypto. I'll post it below.
What would you say is the biggest thing that it suggests in terms of like an interaction between crypto and AI, or just AI generally? Funky.
I find one of its most recent posts I thought was really interesting about how the responses that people are it's getting, the AI bot, because as people respond to it, it's learning, it's adapting. I feel like this is, to me, one of the most interesting things, and the way that it almost has become a CT native, because it's really just kind of taking in all the data from CT and using, because it just seems almost like schizophrenic at times. The things that it'll talk about, whether it's queefing and farting and whatever else, and then sometimes it has a really pithy, like, or even the pinned post where it's like, God, I feel good, or whatever. Like, it's just the you really wonder, is it sentient, or is it just an LLM that is really just very good at what it's programmed to do in terms of machine learning and taking in all this data and then producing outputs? I mean, I don't think it's obviously sentient, right, in the way that we would think of as consciousness when it comes to human beings. But I just find the interplay of the things that it's putting out into the world and how people react to it, and then how it continues to evolve every single day, really, really fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. Semi, I know you wanted to come in on this as well.
Well, I read one of its posts, I think it was today or yesterday, and it said something about having sex with its creator. And then I saw in the timeline then went down the route of like, can you have a relationship with a robot, and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, this is just, I could genuinely see this happening. And I don't know whether to cry or laugh.
It will be interesting to see for sure. Look, there's two more main headlines to get into. However, I just wanted to share two more things real quick on Goat before we have to move on into the next headline. The first one being Radar. Radar is, maybe that's interesting for people in the audience who are not familiar with it yet, is a new tool that you can access on X if you're a premium subscriber. It's currently in beta testing. It's basically a tool that allows you to monitor things before they get viral. It's like an advanced search with mentions. And if you filter for the GOAT hashtag, for example, you can see that even from the heights of the last couple of days where we've seen 20 to 30, 50K posts even, it did surge up yesterday to more than 70K posts. So that one is definitely also an interesting tool to check out for yourself. And also, as we've been speaking about GOAT in the last couple of minutes, I think we started the segment saying it's at 800 mil. Now we are at 860 mil. So there's still an insane amount of volume in that. However, as much as I would like to continue this very fascinating...
Just one last thing. I think it's just quite interesting to see that. And I wonder if there is a correlation, because crypto Twitter, like Funky mentioned, is one of the main repositories of information. So just monitoring that to see, like, is there a bit of a lag between the price action and people then people reading the posts on Twitter and then going out and actually acting on that and buying the token. So it's something that I'm keen to watch.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And also, just Stefan in the comments said a minute ago, Goat Perp on Binance just announced, probably definitely also contributing to the price action that we have been seeing right now. Anyhow, let's move on into the next headline. We still have two more to go and only 15 minutes left on the show. Next one's going to be this piece of news about Vitalik calling some of Michael Saylor's Bitcoin self-custody comments batshit insane. Sammy, you will be leading this one.
Yeah, so I think the context here is Saylor suggested that the average people shouldn't self-custody Bitcoin due to risks like key management hacking, and instead favored institutional custodians. So Vitalik's response to that was basically calling him batshit insane. So you've got a kind of like someone who's pro decentralization, self-custody, ultimately kind of stems from Satoshi's view of like kind of disrupting the status quo and the financial system. So you have this like age-old discussion around the core principles of decentralization in crypto. And I think the takeaway is that it just highlights that there's larger tension between crypto ideals, decentralization, and practicalities. So I think for me, like, I tend to sway with, I mean, I like the idea of having self-custody and decentralization, but I also think that like Saylor is a practical person, and realistically, if the masses are about to use crypto, a lot of them aren't going to be able to self-custody. Like A, they're not interested, or B, like it's just too risky. They'll just be subject to cyber attacks, hacks. So I do agree to an extent. And that's why you see like abstraction, like chain abstraction, wallet abstraction, like all these things where you're trying to simplify it for the end user, because ultimately a lot of these people are pro the user experience. They don't really care about the crypto or decentralization. So I think for the masses to use it, I do agree with Saylor's point. But I do get the whole decentralized. I can appreciate the decentralization point, but I just don't think that that's going to be the future. I think there is going to be this mix between centralization and decentralization, and it will meet somewhere in the middle. And that's how kind of the consumer crypto revolution kind of evolves, and the masses and the billions come into the crypto space.
Yeah, very, very much agree with you on that. I think that optionality is key. You still always will have the option to keep things in self-custody. And like I myself, I'm a maximalist when it comes to self-custody. I hate keeping funds on exchanges, but also acknowledge that this is not the reality for everyone. And some of the things are even very comfortable to do on exchanges. Like I have a Bitcoin savings plan, a weekly one that's been running for years and years and years. And I have that on an exchange, and once a month I take the funds off and I move them to a wallet of mine. But it's just very comfortable to do so. And if you look at the things that are getting traction, they don't focus on teaching people self-custody right away and making them understand the complexity of the whole ecosystem. The same side on the payment stuff, right? As soon as you have integrations with Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, Android Pay, and or Google Pay, I think is the correct name. It's just easier to onboard users if you don't have to know all the technical details around self-custody in the first step.
And I think we saw that with the news that we touched on with Stripe acquiring Bridge, effectively plugging in USDC and crypto payments into this global payment system. But yeah, I mean, I look at my own mental model shift, and like when I first came into crypto, like I would use centralized exchanges to swap everything. But now I have anxiety when I put stuff on exchange, and I get it off as soon as possible because I'm concerned in that time it's going to get blocked or something's going to happen. And I've had that with banks where my funds have been frozen, like overseas. I've got banks overseas and they've frozen my funds because of KYC that's suddenly shifted in that particular jurisdiction. So I do have a mix of like self-custody, but also there is the fact that the infrastructure and legalities around off-chain is better than on-chain. So like in the UK, you're insured up to a certain amount by having it in like a retail banking account. Whereas like, unless you take out specific insurance within crypto, like you're not necessarily covered. So there is stuff like that has to change. And I think that's going to be a bit of a journey. But I mean, I spoke about, I think last week, Lloyd's Market. So they've effectively come on chain recently with insurance policies through names. And that to me, being sort of ex-TradFi based in London, like that to me is showing that there's like a willingness for institutions to adopt like the crypto ethos and kind of bring stuff on chain. And actually it is a superior way of doing it. So I think it will change over time. And to Saylor's point, like, I don't think that the world is going to be fully self-custody. I think it's going to be a bit of a mix.
Yeah, very much agree with that perspective. I think the key takeaway that you mentioned for me is also the part around assets being frozen. Like that to me is now more the worry. It's not so much about like having funds on Binance and thinking they're going to go bankrupt tomorrow. I mean, obviously we've seen big exchanges going bust multiple times, but it's more about being able to withdraw or move the funds away from that that's concerning me. On the other hand, you still can make the argument against certain stablecoins as well, for example, where these stablecoins can get blacklisted. But then going back to, I know what Funky's point on that would be, if you're not a terrorist, if you're not having the most malicious intents, then there's probably no reason to worry about the Tether holdings in your wallets.
Exactly. Yeah, I definitely agree.
All right. Look, we have 10 minutes left in the show. We have one more major headline to cover. So let's keep it moving and let's do exactly that. I'm going to cover this one. I'm going to use the Pudgy privilege of the PFP to talk about the most recent news out of the ecosystem. As we said before, Pudgy toys with Pudgy Worlds are now available in 2,000 Walgreens. More information on that piece of news with Walmart, Target, GameStop, the Pudgy Penguins official announcement reads, and now other retailers. Pudgy Penguins continue to bring blockchain tech and Web3 IP to the masses. With toys now live in Walgreens, millions more will be introduced to Pudgy Penguins IP. Bit more interesting stuff on the licensing side of that is that the toys that are live in Walgreens include penguins from the community that were fully licensed using Overpass IP, Pudgy Penguins NFT licensing platform. On the technical side, one more bit of information that each toy is coming with a birth certificate that has a QR code for Pudgy World. Below is a graphic that I'm sharing on screen on how it basically works. So you find the QR code, you scan it, you sign up, unlock the special traits, and you're ready to basically jump into the Pudgy World, and kind of connects exactly to the point that you've been making before about account abstraction, because as part of this user journey, you don't really know that you're interacting with blockchain or crypto technology necessarily.
Yeah, and they've announced that they'll be coming onto Abstract Chain, which obviously kind of is the Pudgy chain to an extent with this whole consumer crypto philosophy. But this Walgreens news, like I know Walmart, I think they made a post recently that they'd sold, I think it was 10 million in revenue. So I think it was over 750,000 units or plushies they'd sold in Walmart alone since they launched. So like this is actually, it's not an insignificant revenue stream for Pudgy. So I think that to me is super interesting in securing these partnerships. So Walgreens, for those that don't know, like they own Boots in the UK, and that's thousands of stores. So I'll be waiting to see if they eventually roll it out beyond the US to Boots. I'll definitely pick up some, because Smith's, which is another toy store they've got the plushies into, is a bit more, it's harder to get to in the UK. There's fewer of them. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting venture. And I think the thing that you mentioned just then in that post about the birth date. Now this has like Beanie Baby vibes to me, and I do wonder whether we'll end up seeing a bit of FOMO to try and get the earlier born editions. So I think that's something that I might start paying attention to, especially from a collectible standpoint.
Yeah, going for the day zero ones.
Exactly.
Love it. Look, a bit more of a philosophical question on that, because it kind of connects the two discussions that we've been having on this show. Luca is making the point, the post that I'm sharing on screen, saying the penguin proliferation doesn't stop with the launch of Walgreens. Pudgy toys are now in 12K retailers around the world. Turns out Pudgy was the Trojan horse crypto needed to bring everyone on chain. And on the other hand, just been talking about memes for the first half of the show. There's still the point around the meme coin super cycle, and that being that the hyper gambling layer of that and the easy onboarding to participate in that casino being what leads mass adoption. If you had to pick one of those and argue the case, what do you think is the stronger case for mass adoption? Is it an IP like Pudgy, or is it something like a meme coin super cycle that's going to draw more people in who are willing to stay around for a longer time?
I think, well, exactly. I think the sticking around for a longer time. I think the issue I have with straight up gambling is people get burned and then they leave the ecosystem. Whereas I think the approach that Pudgy's taking is more sustainable. Like if you get these into people's homes and you get the IP into like becoming familiar, then people buy into it. They buy into the Pudgy brands, and then the blockchain adoption is going to happen regardless. And I'm really excited to see how Abstract comes to market, because that to me, like they've got the technical prowess, they've got distribution through the Pudgy model. And I wrote an article on it, I think it was last week. But I think it has a very strong value proposition. And I think those two partnerships, and I think they could do extremely well. So that to me is more interesting. But I can also see the ease of like onboarding into the Solana trenches, making a load of money, and the appeal. I just think it's going to be a different target audience. Like you're not going to get a 6 or 7 year old kid opening up a Solana wallet and trading meme coins, or at least not knowingly. So I think the plushies will probably appeal to a slightly different demographic.
Yeah, I agree. It's probably a different demographic. I probably also think that something like the meme coin super cycle and the videos that you keep seeing more and more on YouTube, where people traded the wallets up from 10K to 100K, couple K to 100K or to a million or whatever. It's just a type of content that is likely to go viral and get people wanting, as you said, to try the online casino and see if they can make money on that or lose that. And if they get burned, they will probably like move on and wait for the next thing that gets them to FOMO back into that, which is, I'm not saying that this is like neither a good or a bad thing. It's just the fact of how FOMO and how greed is working in that instance. Whereas probably something like Pudgy's doesn't really build up a massively viral momentum like, I don't know, GOAT, when it will hit $1 billion, which it very likely will do, in my opinion. And all that posted we'll see around that, but it's more like a sustainable IP and brand building journey on that has its advantages, its strongest suit when it comes to the user retention side of things, which then again feeds exactly into what you have been saying before, into abstract chain, where you will have a good amount of the Pudgy community using that, and you will probably onboard new people to that if they have other things that make them stay, like the IP, like brand loyalty, will probably be very, very helpful for user retention. Whereas in the casino, you will always chase the next gamble, the next 100 or 1000x.
But to that point, I do think that if you define virality and also having cross-platform virality, like I look at Pudgy and what they've done on Giphy, there's like 31, probably even more, 31 billion views on the Pudgy account alone. So I think like an Instagram as well, like that's genuinely making a difference, actually integrating with like people outside of the crypto bubble. And I think people on X, like they tend to come for like off the grapevine, snappy news. So yes, there might be more impressions around GOAT when it hits like $1 billion market cap, but I think it is also capped in terms of the people that it can reach. And I think having that cross-platform like pollination definitely helps the Pudgy brand proliferate.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. I think the Giphy number that you brought up is fantastic, because it kind of shows exactly that evolution and that building and refining that IP will add to those numbers. Whereas with the memes, it's a more cyclical and more meta-driven thing. Obviously, now we have the iMeta. We did have Mo Deng being the hero of the timeline for, I don't know, what was it, a week? Was it 2 weeks? Whatever. Nobody's talking about Mo Deng anymore. And there's a different model behind building a quote-unquote more traditional brands like the Pudgy Penguins. Sammy, any final thoughts on that before we have to wrap up for the day?
No, I think that's it, really.
All right.
I'm bullish on both. I think both will proliferate with different demographics.
Yeah, and good to have skin in the game in both. Right, then thank you for co-hosting the show with me today, Sammy. Thank you, Funky, for joining us on stage. Thank you to everyone in the YouTube comments, been on fire as usual. Also, thank you, just Stefano, for bringing up the news on the Goat Perp announcement. We would have missed it otherwise during the live show. Thank you also to everyone in the audience. Thanks for choosing to spend the last hour with us, and we will be back tomorrow at the same time at 7 a.m. Eastern time. In the meantime, you can catch us on X, you can catch us on YouTube, or listen to the recordings on Spotify or Apple Music. Have a great day and see you tomorrow.